Hello, this is Aaron Rosen, your local realtor in Northern California. Today I just wanted to watch a clip by California Insider where they talk about housing prices continue to surge even though we're building as much as we can. All right, let's take a listen.
Nobody wants to talk about the reason that housing is so expensive. It's really simple. It's just not that complicated to figure out. Housing is expensive, costs more, because more people want to live here than we have housing units for.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Real simple. And it's been that way for hundreds, if not thousands of years, that if you have more people want to be somewhere than they have housing for, it will cost more. Very simple. That's a reason why people down at the beach will pay a lot more, because more people want to be there than somebody who wants to be much farther away from the beach or farther away for development.
Supply and demand. Okay.
Those kind of issues that you have. But it's very simple. The problem that we've had in the last 4 years with the Biden administration, and not even to be political about it, but just as a real thing that happened, we are short the amount of housing units we need in the country. And then we allowed 8 million people over a 4-year period come in to the United States, legal or illegal, however you want to define the term.
He may be right about this. I want to say we've had a housing crisis in California since the 70s. So, that's icing on the cake, but let's continue.
Terms with no housing for them. And to somehow think you could just add 8 million people, which comes out to like 2.5 people per housing unit on average, 3.8 million new housing units you need over a 4-year period. I mean, that's a lot of housing units. You just can't do it. And so
in California, we build basically 100,000, give or take, each year. So, do the math yourself.
Situation, how does it get? You're not going to build your way out of it. There's simply not enough money to go ahead and build.
No, I don't know if I agree with that. We could dramatically lower the cost of building and we could build our way out of it. I think that with problems like supply and demand, it's important to address supply and demand. That way you're attacking the problem from both sides.
I mean, when we're seeing infill apartment projects at $700,000-800,000 for a 1-bedroom unit, I mean, that's billions upon billions of dollars to build a bunch of housing units for people.
Yeah, but just like I was saying, if it costs $200,000, then it's 20% of whatever number he's quoting here. So yeah, I think he's waffling a little bit. Let's just see what he has to say, though.
People that weren't even supposed to be here, but for whatever reason, previous administration just said, "Oh, you're all asylum seekers. Come on in, everything's fine." And not worry about how we're going to solve it. So the reason the housing cost is high is we have more people here than we have housing units for. And until that number goes down, you're not going to make up the difference.
What about investments from other countries and people buying a lot of housing from China and other countries in Southern California or in California in general?
That's a great point because, someone's going to buy these houses, right? And if it's not us, then it's somebody else. So,
Yeah, so you're kind of getting to the question of when people that may or may not live here full-time, whatever, have a house as a second house or they're somewhere else. Are you talking about?
It's a lot of people.
That kind of gets into the whole issue with housing, with the Airbnbs. I mean, you had houses built that people were living in that are now kind of structured as hotels or rooms for rent. And so that house no longer is a home that's in there. I think Airbnb's
they don't believe how toxic this is. If you're still using a plastic or wooden cutting board, you need to...
I think it was 2015, and I'm going to give or take on this number. It's about 1 million, 1.2 million Airbnbs in the United States. Now there's 2.5 million.
Okay.
That's 1.2 million more units that were being rented, either a house or an apartment, being rented out.
It's gone from this housing mix.
From the market. So all of a sudden, those are just not there. So
what is that? Is that 20,000 per state? I'm not sure if I got my math right on that, but yeah. I mean, obviously there'll be some more in some states. California's a big tourist state. Maybe Nevada isn't, despite Vegas.
Which you talked about earlier. We have areas in Irvine where we have a massive Chinese population of people that are from mainland China who bought a house here because they think of it almost as a lifeboat. If they need to get out of China, they'd have a place.
Well, China's interesting because their investments are actually more towards real estate than other countries. You can't really buy in the stock market in the same way that you can here. I've seen documentaries about that. Basically, everybody invests in these houses and then, well, they'll be more like apartment buildings, but they're then what's called tofu dregs, and they're really low quality and they fall apart. So people will buy them even before they're built, and then it gets built and then basically it's no good, so they say, oh well, I'd rather build or buy in California here
To stay and have a house here. And so there's areas that a lot of those houses, people don't live there a lot of the time. So it's kind of the same thing as like you built housing units, but they're not being used as normal housing units.
Do you think this is why the rents went up too? Because the rents went up almost by 50%, and there was some level of competition. When people would list the house, they would get a lot of applications.
Right.
Yeah, that was COVID.
I mean, what'll happen is you'll have more people. You look at different places. You got brand new apartments that are super expensive. You have properties that are 15, 20 years old that aren't as nice as the new stuff is. You got stuff 30 and 40 years old. I don't know about you, but my first apartment wasn't brand new. It was an older place. It was inexpensive. It was cheaper to get into. As you bring more people in, they fill up those bottom tier apartments. They put more people in there. They get more rent. It moves people out, maybe the nicer apartments. But it keeps on pushing it to the point where, I mean, what are rents now? 2-bedroom places in Orange County are $3,000, $4,000. I mean, that's kind of a crazy rent.
Same here.
Didn't have to pay that amount of rent even 5, 6, 7 years.
In Sonoma County, where I'm at, I just saw a friend on Facebook post a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 1,000 square feet for $2,800 a month, and it was fairly nice, but probably not worth that.
To go the way that the cost of rent's gone up. And then also for renters, think about this. They don't get any deduction. A homeowner is making a house payment and getting an interest deduction. A renter's just falling farther and farther behind. Also think about this. When you do your income taxes, you pay a certain rate depending on how much money you make. The more money you make, the higher your rate goes. So
a progressive tax.
Areas that have more people coming into it, and they need to live in more expensive housing, jobs have to pay them more money, but nobody changed the brackets on your income taxes. So now a person, 5, 6 years ago was ever paying $2,000 a month rent, they're now paying $4,000, and maybe they got
tax.
That's the first good point he's made. The other point I had about this is, look, generally, your taxes on your house every year, that's going to be about 1%. But houses have gone up 40, 50%, and they haven't changed that tax. So they're just raking in cash, but it's a higher and higher percentage of someone's income. So I think that also needs to change. Perhaps it should be modulated with inflation or rent or housing prices.
Or the higher tax. Let's say their income did go up.
Yeah,
their income did go up, but they're at a higher rate on their taxes. So if they made $2,000 more, they don't really end up with $2,000 more. So again, there are some really simple rules about supply and demand, and it affects housing, it affects apartments, it affects everything. You cannot have 8 million people show up and wonder what we're going to do with them or put them someplace. I mean, we saw the stuff that was going on.
Yeah, but talk about California here. Not 8 million people came into California. I'll wait till he's finished to see if he addresses it, but he is not addressing the major issues of why housing is so expensive, especially in California.
Went on in New York for a while at the different hotels and stuff. Billions of dollars were spent to house people that weren't even supposed to be here. Where does that money come from? And then meanwhile, you've got people in the country that can't afford housing. Now, let's be honest about it. People understand that if you allow people to come into the country, illegally, legally, or whatever in between gray, that you have in there, that Americans over time soften up. We're like, well, they've been there for 10 years. They paid their taxes. They're good people. We don't want to, do something to let them out, to kick them out. But the problem is, it doesn't get us any more housing. They still have to be housed. They still have to be put into schools. They still have to be taken care of at hospitals. And the idea of, well, they pay their taxes, people that are here legally or illegally, will they pay their taxes? That somehow pays for their burden? Yet the amount of income they make and the amount of taxes they pay really doesn't pay for what it costs for their health care, what it costs.
There's a lot of second and third order effects just beyond paying taxes, like he's talking about with houses.
For their housing that could be subsidized, or what it costs for schooling. So it used to be, remember, when you came to this country, you'd sign a thing saying, I will not go on welfare. You had to sign that, or you had to have your sponsor say they will make sure you don't go on welfare. Yet in California, we went ahead and changed the laws and just said, healthcare is now free for everybody, whether you're here legally, illegally, or again, gray market, and we can argue about what's what. But and how they passed those kind of laws is they'd say, I can't remember what the number was, but I remember reading the first time it was in there, and it says, it'll cost like, $400 per person. And I'm like, what do you mean? Or some ridiculous number. I can't remember. It cost me more than that to get a health insurance policy. Clearly, it costs more than that. But how do you get bills passed? You make the number look lower. Once you pass the law, then you come back and you say, oh my gosh, look how much more it costs to pay for health care. This is just amazing. We're just shocked by it. When everybody knew the game was up. The idea is get things passed, put them through the process. So again, it's kind of like with the housing issue or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, it'll only cost so much money. Get the rules changed. Get everything done to say you'll do it, and don't worry about what the issues are after.
Okay, so, he's got a few good points here, but he's just waffling this question. Look, he's right about supply and demand, and he addressed one side of this. That's going to be the demand. Obviously, you bring in more people, that's more demand for houses. But the supply, in California, we're short, it's 2 to maybe 4 million units. That's huge. I don't think that there was that many proportional people that came through. If 0 people had come over the border into California, we would have still had a housing shortage. So to blame them, like I said, that's icing on the cake. There's a whole debate about whether it's good or bad, but let me just set the record straight. The reason housing is so expensive in California is because of regulations and taxes. There's CEQA, which is basically the Environmental Protection Act, and that it'll cost builders thousands of dollars per unit. I saw one thing that said it was up to $7,000 per unit for that. So if someone's going to be building 100 units, that's $700,000. And that's not to mention all the local fees and taxes. There's tons of them. Here in Sonoma County, it'll cost you $60,000 to $80,000 in permits before you can even put a shovel into the ground. That's amazing. So, if you're building a $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 house, by the way, that's not including all the other costs. You have to get an architect, and you have to hire all these different people. So it's literally $100,000 to $150,000 worth of nonsense just to build a house here in Sonoma County. And the other one is land. Land is so incredibly expensive here. About 50% of the land in California is owned by the government. Another thing, I like wine as much as the next person, but in Sonoma County and Napa, a lot of the land is just dominated by wineries. How about making them sell, 2 or 5% of their land so we can build some houses? I look around all the time, right? If you just go on Google Earth and just peek at it, you'll see that there are huge fields. I was driving north literally yesterday, and there's a field on the side of the road. You could put 5 Santa Rosas in this giant grape field. So Like I said, attack a problem from the supply side and from the demand side. Otherwise, you're really just playing games here. So he had his own political spin, but he really didn't address what I thought to be the key issues in this.